Today, hope all is going well. I think right, the expectation is to win ball games at the end of the day, and obviously it didn't fall in our favor. I'm sure there's going to be questions about situations we were put in, and I could care less about that. From a defensive standpoint, the job is to be an extinguisher, right? Some goes wrong, some happens, right? Just do your job, right? Force field goals instead of touchdowns. Force no points instead of touchdowns at the end of the day. I did think the guys came out with good energy. I thought we were a lot cleaner, and obviously in the penalty department, it's magical things that can happen when you don't have personal fouls after plays and you give yourselves a chance. Obviously, it wasn't good enough for us to win, and so it's always back to the lab every single day. But everything we want is still ahead of us. And so, although it's been a lot of growth through these 3 games, the goal is to continue to grow as we start off and play FAU this week. Any questions?
What was so improved about the ability to stop the run in this game?
I think guys just doing their job and their assignment and nothing more than that. I do think the first couple of weeks guys were chasing things, and just fundamental routine things that we typically make. Guys are jumping out of gaps. They're just not being fundamentally sound, and it got exposed. Things like that get exposed against good teams, And so, obviously, playing Penn State, right? They run a different offense than the last 2 we played, but I think these young men, they wanted to be a lot more fundamentally sound and detailed, and obviously that was a point that we harped on all week, and it wasn't perfect by no means, and I still think we have to be better and we can improve in a lot of those departments still, but I do think the arrow is headed in the up direction as opposed to downward.
Coach, you have a rotation there at nose tackle, several guys getting opportunities. What did you see from each one of those guys that got a chance on Saturday?
Well, you try to, with those guys being up front, they go so hard and it's a collision every single play. You try to rotate them to keep them fresh. Obviously, Denzel Jackson started off one, right? And as the game kind of went on, right, he's playing a lot of snaps. I think he had 80-some snaps during the course of the game. But, you throw T-Rod in there to make sure he's fresh, right? You get Said a couple of snaps in there as well. And so at the end of the day, the goal is to have a really good result. And I think you never want a nose tackle to play 80-some snaps. And so you try to platoon them and rotate them just to keep the freshest guys out there and the guys that give us the best chance. And I think for us, as a defensive staff, just looking at are there other guys that can help in that rotation as well. That's something that we continue to talk about as the week goes on.
And what does it tell you about your guys? There's obviously a lot of conversation after the first 2 games about where you were defensively to be able to quickly make those adjustments and turn that page.
Well, I think our young men, one thing that I've admired about them is, they've had ample opportunity to lay down and quit and say game's over, right? And I want to just speak to Johnny Newton for a second. Johnny Newton could have came out of that game with 4 or 5 minutes left on the clock, but Johnny Newton didn't want to come out of that game, right? Johnny Newton wasn't going to come out of that game because that's how Johnny Newton is wired. And so it speaks to the kind of young men that we have. Obviously we lost, but they don't really focus on the scoreboard so much. They got an opportunity to get better at their craft. They're going to do that, and so obviously as a coach you appreciate those moments. But we just got to be better overall, so we don't find ourselves in those situations at the end of the game.
You're a human with a heart, so everything that man did to get back on the field. Snap number 1 is laying on the ground. Did you have beyond the football coach, a human reaction of can't believe this?
100%, right? First thing that starts going through my head was, did I protect him enough as a coach? Obviously it was I'll let Coach speak to the details of it, but it was didn't want to see what happened, and it did not like it. Was very, very scared for that young man, whatever it ended up being, but it's unfortunate, man. I've been in those positions, and you see that young man work so hard, and the way he worked and how he grinded, and to get back the way he did, and for him to go through that, man, it's tough and challenging. But obviously, he's still a student of the game. He's still locked in. He's still poised. He had a smile on his face yesterday. You know what I mean? Like nothing really wavers him. Like nothing really messes with his confidence as as a young man and player. But those are definitely some of the harder moments as a coach to see that, right? Obviously, he ended up going back in the game and ended up going down again. But those are always the tough ones, man.
Obviously, we're going to talk about his injury and Demetrius was on crutches,
Right.
but whatever the length of time, like, where do you find the depth in the safety room? Those are two guys that seemingly were kind of by up there.
Yeah, man, good. They're good players. They're really good players for us, and I think throughout fall camp, we've been training a bunch of guys at just a safety position in general, and it happens every year, right? It happened last year at the cornerback position, and you try to rotate guys and train them early in multiple spots, so when these situations do come up, you have answers for them, and you're not really like just pulling from a random position. And so this is something that we pride ourselves on in the offseason, dual training guys for exactly these moments. They happen every year. Every year they happen. Every year I've been in this profession, they've happened in some capacity, whether it's up front or on the back end, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or not. Like it happens at every position. And so this year, right now, it's just so be it's the back end. And I think we got some guys that are more than capable enough and ready to fulfill those spots.
What style of offense do you see from FAU on film and some of the challenges that they'll present to you?
Yeah, they got some very, very, very dynamic skill guys, man, and they do a really good job at getting the ball to them on the perimeter. They have a running back that's hard-nosed. He runs downhill. I mean, it goes without saying, right? Like, they got Florida speed on that roster, right? They got dudes who in open space can make you miss, right? I don't care if they're playing against the best of the best or anybody. Like, they have players on that roster who can change the game with the ball in their hands. And so I think they do a really good job offensively by getting their playmakers the ball. Sometimes you have teams who have playmakers, and that dude may not get the ball to the second, third, fourth quarter. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to getting it to them early. And they do a really, really good job at trying to get their playmakers the ball early and establish something with them, and then just putting them in space, right? Those guys are really, really hard to tackle in space. It's going to be very important for us, obviously, gang tackling this week and running to the football. But I think they do a really good job at making you play 11-on-11 football.
Obviously, you know how good Johnny Newton is,
Yeah.
but when he plays that way, what does that mean for your defense?
That is the heart and soul of how we want to be identified when Johnny Newton plays the way he played on Saturday. Johnny is a very, very special player, and it obviously goes without saying. Like you guys see that, but that's how that kid works. That's how that young man works. Like, he don't have an off button, and what's crazy is he gets stronger the longer the game goes. And I've never seen nothing like it up front. We actually did an off-season study. Like a lot of interior D linemen get tired as the game goes on. He actually gets stronger, which is crazy to think about. But as he continues to play that way, we're gonna have a chance to win every football game. Obviously Johnny's a captain for us, he's a leader for us, and we need Johnny to show up like that every single weekend.
How have you seen Alec Bryant progress? We've seen him make some more plays. What stands out to you about him?
Oh, Alec Bryant, he's probably one of the most consistent guys, man. He just does everything right. He's in the right spot. He puts himself in the right position daily, and I think that's I think a lot of that is attributed to the guy that's coaching him and Coach Bullen, and just to his pride in wanting to be better than he was the year before. He's had I think just from a performance standpoint, he's been really clean. He's been doing all his job duties and responsibilities, and so it's like really good for a player like that to come along, because as he does, you start to feed him more, and I think that with the rotation of those outside backers, right, you're going to continue to see that young man develop and grow in our system.
What's it tell you about Clayton Bush, who stepped in when Matt was out, then obviously Matt comes back in, and now maybe Clayton has a bigger chance? Like, what's that tell you about his
Yeah. Obviously, it goes without saying, right? Clayton is a jack of all trades guy, man. Clayton, probably one of the more smarter players I've been around. He is very, very highly intelligent, and so for him to, he was at one drive he was at boundary safety, another one he was at star position, and the kid knows it all, right? Like, he's very, very intelligent, and for him to pop in and out when Bailey went down it was vital for us. But we dual train Clayton in the off season for these kind of moments, right? You don't want to find yourself in a position to where, right, you got a really good player, a player as talented as Clayton, not being on the field because he doesn't understand something. And so you just try to dual train him, right? You try to dual train a couple of those guys in the cardio. You got some of the cardio out there, just so that they understand the position and what we want out of that position. So if a guy does go down, right, there's not a scramble for trying to train a new guy, but a guy that's kind of he probably already knows it, maybe not to the extent that Bailey knew it, just because he's had a lot of reps at it in the past, and so it's just continue to push those guys daily, and I think with what we do, I think we make it easier than probably what most teams would see, in terms of what we run and how we run our defense. And so I think that allows our guys to play a little faster.
Is there something you can do in practice or a focus about getting more takeaways? Is that something you're focusing on?
Yeah, I think obviously you got to emphasize that. We emphasize it every practice, and I think every game is a tad bit different. You will like a takeaway or multiple takeaways every game, and I think it also depends on, like, some young men are a little more wired to it than others. Like obviously last year we had a bunch of them, right? And I think that was a culmination of the quarterback being hit, but that was also a culmination of really good players too, right? Like got really good guys on the back end, older, experienced guys who punched at the ball a lot more, and so we just continue to emphasize that. We probably turned up our tackling and takeaway circuit a lot more this year than we've ever have. It's like when you don't emphasize it, that's when they start doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, as many takeaways we had last year, we didn't emphasize it that much, I promise you, and they were obviously happening. And so we're going to continue to emphasize it, and they typically come in groups of 3. That's when the takeaways start to come. But you try to just show them clips of opportunities to get those takeaways, and like visually show them so they can pull from those, and try to put them in the best position when plays do happen and quarterbacks got the ball exposed. And I know we had a couple of them on the quarterback, a couple of chances on the quarterback to punch the ball out, and we just missed those opportunities. So just continuing to show them the film and in hopes they learn from it, in order to give ourselves an opportunity to take the ball away.
Aaron felt like
obviously learned the FAU quarterback, Casey Thompson, has a torn ACL and will not play. It's in-game adjustments when you see a backup quarterback that you may not have a lot of film on this year in this scheme, something that you anticipate will be a big key.
Yeah, I think when it happens in game, I typically watch the backup quarterback every week just for situations like this. Obviously, we have a couple days in advance to kind of prepare for the backup, so we know a little more about him, having a couple days to prepare for him. But when it happens throughout the course of a game, yeah, it is a little harder, especially for our players, because our players, they may have a couple of clips of the backup quarterback, but they've been studying the primary one all week, and if he hadn't got any reps, sometimes you got to pull from if he was at a previous school or what he did in high school just to see some of his mannerisms, and that's a lot harder. But a lot of that is picked up on the fly once he's thrown into the game. You know what I'm saying? And so it's when he's been at another spot, and if it's a coach that's there with him now, I think you can pick up a lot of those tendencies. But when there hasn't been no previous coach with him, and he's kind of being groomed for this position and thrown into the fire, I do think it's a lot harder because you just have very little eval on him in terms of how he does things in his operation time and his cadence and how he presents himself in terms of when he's addressing the sideline. So it's just a bunch of small details that you try to gather throughout the course of a game once he is in a game, or if he's going to be the starter, or if it's a game time decision, But I think with us having a couple of days in advance, obviously there'll be a lot more focus put on him, because we end up just getting this news like an hour ago. So.
Aaron, outside linebackers seem to really show up in this game. What did you see from them? Why was that the case?
Well, I thought that, I thought that they rushed the passer a lot better this week. I will say I put them in a better position to rush the passer. I was really excited for them because I think that's their strong suit, and they were really clean in some of their drops when they had drops. And I don't know, I just thought overall it was just better detail to what we were asking them to do and how they did it this week. You know what I'm saying? And even throughout the course of the game. And I just thought they were a lot cleaner, just at the point of attack when they were rushing guys. They weren't just getting thick on them or running around them, whether it was speed to power or a particular move. I really thought they tried to cage the quarterback and make him throw from the pocket. Obviously, at times, got to feel a little bit and got to clean up some of our rush lanes. But I do think overall they were a little better. But that goes without saying. It also was a different quarterback back there, right? You didn't have DeQuan Finn running around in the pocket, right? You didn't have Jaden Daniels running around the pocket. You had Drew Aller, who's just different. He's just a bigger target. You know what I'm saying? He moves laterally probably just as well as those guys, but not as faster down the field. And so it was some different techniques put into place, and I think our guys were able to hone in on that. And when they did get upfield and they didn't get past them, they were able to fall back in on some tackles, and I think Gabe ended up having a sack.
All right.